The alien queen closed her eyes to die, but death refused to take her. And when she opened them again, the last face she expected to see was human. The battlefield above the broken planet of Kayla burned in silence. Warships drifted like torn metal leaves in space. Fire from shattered reactors painted the sky in colors no living world should ever see. The air smelled of ozone and ash. Queen Velira of the Tshanan Dominion lay crushed beneath the wreckage of her fallen command cruiser. Her silver-black armor was cracked. Her breathing was shallow. Internal systems flickered inside her suit, warning her that organ failure would begin within minutes. She had lost. The Dominion fleet had been ambushed by an alliance of rival alien houses. Outnumbered. Outgunned. Betrayed. The final explosion had torn her bridge apart and sent her spiraling into the planet's surface below. Now she lay dying in the cold dust of a world that was not hers. Her vision dimmed. For the first time in her long life, Queen Velira felt something close to regret. Not for the throne. Not for the war. But for her people. She had promised them strength. And she had failed. Her eyes closed. Darkness came. Then, warmth. Not the warmth of death. Not the fading quiet of the void. Real warmth. Rough hands were pulling at the twisted metal pinning her down. A voice, low, strained, determined, cut through the ringing in her ears. Come on, don't you dare die on me now. Her eyes opened. A human face hovered above her, covered in soot. Sweat dripping from his brow. Teeth clenched as he pushed against debris far too heavy for one man. She stared at him in disbelief. Humans were not part of this war. Humans were considered minor. Fragile. Curious creatures from a developing system far from Dominion space. Yet here one was. Alive. Stubborn. Lifting a slab of starship hull that weighed more than his entire species was supposed to handle. He grunted and shoved harder. Veins stood out in his neck. With a final roar of effort, the metal shifted just enough. He dragged her free. She collapsed against him, armor sparking weakly. He looked down at her glowing violet eyes and let out a shaky breath. Okay, good. You're alive. That's step one. She tried to speak. Her voice came out fractured. Why? He gave a tired half-smile. Because you're breathing. That seemed like a very human answer. His name was Elias Rowan. He was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He was an engineer assigned to a small human observation vessel studying the outer systems. When the alien battle erupted above Kayla, his ship had been caught in the shockwave and forced to crash land. Most of his crew had evacuated. Elias had stayed behind to send distress signals. That was when he saw her escape pod streak down like a dying star. He could have ignored it. He didn't. Now he had dragged an alien queen into the remains of his broken shuttle and sealed the hatch against the toxic winds. Velira watched him as he worked. He removed pieces of her shattered armor with careful hands. He did not flinch at her claws. He did not show fear at her fangs. He only focused. I'm not a medic, he muttered. But I fix machines. And right now, you're a very complicated machine. She would have been insulted if she had the strength. He connected cables from his shuttle's power core to her suit's emergency ports. Dominion technology was centuries ahead of humanity's. It should not have worked. But Elias studied fast. He adjusted voltage levels. He rerouted power through a converter he built from scrap parts and a food heater. The suit flickered. Stabilized. Her breathing deepened. Velira stared at him in stunned silence. How? She whispered. He shrugged slightly, still focused. Electricity is electricity. Doesn't matter what species built it. You just have to listen to what it's trying to say. Listen to machines. It sounded foolish. Yet he had just saved her life. Outside, the sky trembled. Enemy scan drones were sweeping the crash sites. Velira's instincts sharpened. They search for survivors, she said weakly. If they find me, they will finish what they began. Elias looked toward the shuttle's cracked viewport. How good are their scanners? Very. He nodded slowly. Okay. Then we don't hide. She frowned slightly. Explain. He moved quickly, pulling apart his shuttle's damaged comm array. He rerouted it into a chaotic burst transmitter. Instead of masking their signal, he amplified it. Then he activated every damaged power cell scattered across the battlefield using a remote pulse. Suddenly, dozens of energy signatures flared across the crash zone. To an enemy scanner, it would look like multiple survivors activating distress beacons all at once. Confusion. Noise. Too many targets. The drones hesitated. Their scanning patterns broke formation. Some moved east. Some west. None came directly toward the shuttle. Valeera watched in disbelief. You created chaos intentionally. Elias gave a small grin. Humans are very good at being unpredictable. The drones drifted away. Silence returned. For the first time since the battle, Queen Valeera felt something unexpected stir inside her chest. Hope. Hours passed. She regained more strength as his crude power feed kept her alive. Elias sat across from her, exhausted but alert. You're important, he said quietly. Aren't you? She met his eyes. I am Queen of the Ternan Dominion. He blinked. Of course you are. There was no fear in his voice. No awe. Just simple acceptance. You saved me without knowing that, she said. He shrugged again. You were someone who needed help. That was enough. Such simple logic. Such dangerous compassion. In her empire, power determined value. To this human, life itself was enough. A tremor shook the ground. Far above, warships were repositioning. The enemy would return. Elias looked up. We can't stay here. You cannot outrun a fleet, she said. He smiled slightly. Maybe not. But we can outthink them. He began dismantling more of his shuttle. What are you doing? She asked. Building something new. Within hours, he had constructed a makeshift signal cannon from wreckage. Not a weapon. A message. He aimed it toward deep space and fired a compressed data burst encoded in both human and Dominion frequencies. A call not for rescue, but for alliance. If her surviving forces heard it, they would know she lived. If humanity heard it, they would know something larger had begun. Valeera watched the human engineer as sparks danced around him. Bruised, tired, outmatched, and completely unafraid. She realized something then. Her fleet had lost because they fought with tradition. Predictable formations. Honorable rules. Humans did not fight like that. They adapted. They improvised. They refused to accept the expected outcome. And as long as even one human stood beside her, this war was not over. Far above the planet, an enemy commander received fragmented reports. Multiple signals. Unknown interference. Unidentified transmissions. Then one chilling update. And royal life signs, possibly active. The commander narrowed his eyes. Impossible. The Queen was dead. Wasn't she? Back inside the shuttle, Queen Valeera looked at Elias Rowan. You have changed the board, she said quietly. He wiped grease from his hands. Nah. I just flipped it over. Outside, distant engines roared. The war was coming back. But this time, humanity was part of it. And humanity had just chosen a side. The enemy fleet returned at dawn. Not with chaos this time, but with precision. 3 black war cruisers descended through Kalis-cracked clouds like blades cutting through water. Their hulls shimmered with antimatter shields. Their scanners swept the planet in tight, disciplined arcs. They were not confused anymore. They were hunting. Inside the broken shuttle, Elias saw the shadows pass overhead. Well, he muttered softly, they learned fast. Queen Valeera was standing now. Weak, but standing. The humans' improvised power feed had stabilized her core systems. Her armor remained damaged, yet her eyes burned brighter than before. They will not make the same mistake twice, she said. Elias nodded. Good. That means we won't either. A pulse shook the ground. One of the cruisers fired into a distant wreck site, vaporizing it completely. The enemy commander was erasing every possible hiding place. They will sterilize the surface, Valeera said quietly. Not if they think you're already gone, Elias replied. She looked at him sharply. What are you planning now, human? He gave a quick smile. Something extremely irresponsible. Elias led her out of the shuttle and into the wreckage field. Smoke drifted between twisted hulls. The planet's sky shimmered in unnatural colors from orbital weapon fire. He moved quickly but carefully, collecting parts from destroyed alien fighters. Small reactors. Signal cores. Fractured weapon lenses. You build weapons? Valeera asked. Not exactly, he replied. I build stories. She did not understand, but she followed. Within an hour, Elias had assembled 6 small signal beacons and scattered them across the field in a wide arc. Then he connected them to a central processor salvaged from her own fallen cruiser. Valeera watched as he typed commands into a cracked human datapad. You are simulating something, she realized. Not simulating, he corrected gently. Exaggerating. Above them, the cruisers tightened their scan grid. Elias hit execute. Suddenly, every beacon activated. But they did not transmit a distress call. They transmitted her royal command signature. Amplified. Multiplied. Layered in overlapping frequencies. To the enemy scanners, it looked like dozens of alien command vessels powering up beneath the surface. Energy spikes flared across the grid. The cruisers hesitated. What have you done? Valeera whispered. Elias looked up at the sky. I made them think you're not hiding. A pause. I made them think you're preparing to counterattack. In orbit, alarms rang across the enemy flagship. Multiple Dominion cores detected. Impossible. Our scans confirmed total fleet destruction. Energy readings rising rapidly. The commander frowned. Could this be a trap? No fleet commander wanted to descend into an ambush. Especially not against a queen known for strategic brilliance. For the first time since the battle, doubt crept into their formation. Back on the surface, Elias adjusted the output levels again. The beacons now mimicked weapon charging sequences. Valeera stared at him in disbelief. You are bluffing an entire fleet. He shrugged lightly. Poker is a human tradition. A beam of light lanced down from orbit. One of the false signal sites exploded. Then another. The enemy was testing. Elias didn't flinch. Good, he said calmly. They are nervous. You cannot sustain this illusion forever, Valeera warned. I don't need forever. He pointed upward. Just long enough. A faint signal pinged through the atmosphere. Valeera's ears lifted. That frequency. Elias grinned. Your people. She closed her eyes briefly, focusing. Yes. Far beyond the outer debris field, 3 battered iron warships emerged from hyperspace. They had received the earlier transmission Elias sent. Not a rescue signal. A rally call. The enemy commander saw them too. Dominion reinforcements incoming. How many? Uncertain. Their sensor profile is unstable. Unstable, because Elias was still flooding the battlefield with false energy signatures. To the enemy fleet, it now appeared as though a hidden surface army was coordinating with arriving reinforcements. The advantage of surprise was gone. The enemy ships pulled into defensive formation. Hesitation turned into caution. Caution turned into retreat positioning. On the planet's surface, Elias exhaled slowly. Humans don't win by being stronger, he said quietly. We win by making the other side unsure. Above them, the first enemy cruiser broke formation. Then the second. The third lingered, calculating. Valeera stepped forward despite her injuries. She activated what remained of her command uplink and transmitted one clear message into orbit. This is Queen Valeera of the Tchinen Dominion. Her voice carried authority again. You have failed. Silence followed. Then, the final cruiser pivoted and jumped to hyperspace. The battlefield fell quiet. The enemy was gone. Elias let out a long breath and sat down heavily on a chunk of wreckage. Well, he said, that was mildly terrifying. Valeera stared at the empty sky. You defeated them without firing a single shot. He shook his head. No. You did. I just gave them a reason to believe you could. Her surviving warships began descending carefully toward the surface. Rescue teams deployed. Churn soldiers spread across the ruins. They found their queen standing beside a human engineer covered in grease and ash. The soldiers hesitated when they saw him. Valeera raised a hand. He is under my protection. No one questioned her. Elias looked up at her. So, what happens now? She studied him. Her empire had been built on strength, on discipline, on superiority. But today, her survival had depended on something entirely different. Improvisation, creativity, unpredictable courage. Traits her people had once dismissed as primitive. Now, she said slowly, we adapt. Hours later, aboard her restored flagship, Valeera stood before her council. Holographic projections replayed the battle. They showed the false signals, the manipulated scans, the hesitation of the enemy fleet. An elder commander spoke carefully. This strategy, it was not Dominion doctrine. No, Valeera agreed. It was human. Murmurs filled the chamber. Humans are not a military power. They are fragmented. They lack unified command. Valeera turned toward them, her eyes blazing. They lack predictability. Silence fell. She stepped forward. Our enemies know our formations, our traditions, our pride. She paused. They do not understand humans. She allowed the words to settle. And that is our advantage. Later, Elias stood alone at a viewing window, watching stars streak by as the ship entered hyperspace. He felt very small inside the massive alien vessel. Valeera approached quietly. You will be returned to your people with honor, she said. He nodded. Appreciate that. She studied him carefully. You saved more than my life. He smiled faintly. Humans have a habit of showing up where we're not expected. Yes, she replied softly. I have noticed. Outside the window, the stars bent into brilliant lines. The war was not finished. The enemy would regroup. They would learn. But so would humanity. And for the first time in galactic history, alien empires were beginning to understand something dangerous. Humans did not need the biggest fleet. They did not need ancient technology. They did not even need equal strength. All they needed was a problem no one else knew how to solve, and a reason to refuse surrender. The galaxy did not fear humanity. Not yet. In the grand councils of ancient empires, humans were still described with small words. Developing. Unrefined. Emotion-driven. They were known for art. For curiosity. For reckless exploration. Not for war. Not for strategy. And certainly not for changing the balance of power between civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. But that was about to change. Weeks after the Battle of Kala, Queen Valeera stood inside the Dominion's Grand War Chamber. The curved walls shimmered with starlight projections. Entire fleets floated in holographic form before her. Across the chamber stood commanders, advisors, and diplomats. And one human. Elias Rowan looked slightly uncomfortable in formal clothing designed by alien tailors who clearly did not understand human shoulders. But he stood tall anyway. The Dominion fleet had survived. Barely. Enemy forces had regrouped at the edge of Dominion space. Larger now. More cautious. Determined to erase the embarrassment of their retreat. They will not fall for the same deception twice, one commander warned. No, Valeera agreed. They will expect unpredictability. All eyes shifted to Elias. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Then we don't give them unpredictability. Silence filled the chamber. We give them something worse, he continued. We give them cooperation. The Dominion had never formed alliances with younger species. It was seen as beneath them. But Elias had studied human history. Humanity's greatest victories had not come from dominance. They came from unity. When humans faced extinction-level threats on their own world, they did not win because they were the strongest. They won because they learned to work together. Messily. Imperfectly. But together. Within days, human communication networks lit up. Elias transmitted a direct message to Earth's United Systems Council. Not a request for protection. Not a cry for help. A proposal. An alliance built not on control, but on shared survival. The Council debated fiercely. Humanity was not ready for a galactic war. Their fleets were smaller. Their weapons less advanced. But one fact could not be ignored. A human had already changed the course of one battle. What could billions do? The vote passed. Humanity would stand beside the Dominion. The enemy fleet advanced again. This time, they came prepared for tricks. They tightened formation. They shielded communications. They deployed counter-signal drones. They were ready for deception. What they were not ready for was humanity. As the fleets met near the shattered moon of Taris, something strange happened. Human ships did not mirror Dominion formations. They scattered. They moved in loose, shifting clusters. At first glance, it looked chaotic. Disorganized. The enemy commander smiled. Primitive, he muttered. Then the chaos began to move with purpose. Human vessels used small size and speed to weave between enemy cruisers. They targeted sensor arrays instead of weapons. They disrupted communications instead of shields. They deployed clouds of reflective debris that scrambled targeting systems. Instead of overpowering the enemy, they blinded them. Dominion ships followed immediately behind, striking precisely where human interference created openings. It was not elegance. It was not tradition. It was adaptation in real time. On the flagship bridge, Queen Velira watched human pilots break formation rules she had followed her entire life. They made decisions on instinct, on teamwork, on trust. One human fighter sacrificed its engines to shove an enemy missile off course, saving 3 Dominion vessels. Another transmitted its own shield frequencies to protect a damaged alien cruiser mid-battle. They did not hesitate. They did not calculate personal survival first. They chose action. The enemy commander realized too late what was happening. His fleet had prepared for predictable warfare. They were facing something else entirely. A species that thrived inside uncertainty. In the heart of the battle, Elias stood beside Velira. He was not piloting a ship. He was coordinating something far more dangerous. Human AI systems, designed for traffic control and disaster management on Earth, were now analyzing battlefield data faster than any ancient military computer. They identified patterns, predicted reactions, suggested maneuvers no rigid doctrine would ever allow. Left flank will tighten in 12 seconds, Elias said calmly. Velira relayed the command. Dominion ships moved before the enemy completed the order. Again and again, human adaptability broke enemy timing. And timing was everything. Within hours, the enemy formation fractured. Not destroyed. Broken. Confused. Retreat signals echoed across space. For the second time, the enemy fleet fled. Silence settled over Taris. Wreckage drifted slowly. Human and Dominion ships held position side by side. On open channels, something extraordinary happened. Human captains spoke directly with alien commanders. No superiority. No hierarchy. Just coordination. Queen Velira turned to Elias. "You have altered more than a battle," she said quietly. He watched stars reflect in the viewport. "Humans aren't the strongest," he replied. "But we've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars. We learned one thing. And that is, when things look impossible, that's when we start getting creative." She studied him carefully. For centuries, my people believed strength meant control. Elias smiled slightly. Sometimes strength means letting new ideas in. Months later, a galactic summit was called. Species that had once dismissed humanity now requested meetings. Not because humans had superior weapons, but because they had demonstrated something rare. Flexible courage. Inventive thinking under pressure. The ability to unite different minds toward one goal. The phrase began to spread quietly across star systems. If humans are involved, expect the unexpected. It was not fear. Not yet. It was respect. On the balcony of her palace world, Queen Velira stood beside Elias one final time before he returned to Earth. You could remain here, she offered. You would be honored. He shook his head gently. Humans explore. It's what we do. She inclined her head slightly. Then explore knowing this. Your species will never again be underestimated by the Dominion. He smiled. That's all we ever wanted. A seat at the table. As his transport lifted toward the stars, Velira felt something shift within her empire. Not weakness. Growth. The war had not ended forever. The galaxy was still vast. Still dangerous. But something new had been born in its chaos. A partnership. A realization. Humanity did not need ancient empires to validate them. They did not need overwhelming power. They needed opportunity. Give humans a broken battlefield, limited resources, and impossible odds, and they would build something no one expected. Not because they were flawless. Not because they were invincible. But because when the universe tells humans to accept defeat, they look back and redesign the universe instead.